Good evening, Chancellor Banks, esteemed members of the DOE, esteemed parents, and education stakeholders. It is so great to welcome you this evening as part of our series on the future of education in New York City, especially in underserved communities. The New York City Coalition for Educating Families Together is a big tent organization that is education, family, and community centric. At New York City South, we recognize the need to educate in all sorts of ways, in all sorts of settings, and we recognize the need for multiple paths to educational success. The reason for that is simple. It is the students and their academic needs that decide the fashion in which they ought to be educated. We reject the one size fits all model and believe in an educational system that is tailored to meet the needs of every child, regardless of ability, zip code, class, race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, and language spoken at home. For this vision to really become a reality, it is important to have all stakeholders at the table as partners, and it is important for stakeholders to help build a larger table at which we all can have a seat. For this vision to become a reality, education cannot be at the mercy of politics. It has to be at the mercy of students and their needs. And this, by definition, means deep partnerships with the students themselves, their families, and the communities in which they reside. Like politics, education is local and deeply personal, even if it is part of a larger system. The question before you tonight, Chancellor, is how do you and how do we co-create a system that is responsive to the needs of every child without further dividing us? Where we all can scream in unison that we are all here for the children and for the best education that we can give to them. Whether you like it or not, you're more than just a leader of schools. Your position as our chancellor makes you a leader of peoples and of communities and the author of an education philosophy that can work for the greatest number of students possible, if not all of us. Tonight, we are interested in hearing how your vision of your job is developing. In the interest of time, Chancellor, we give you the floor because we have lots of questions for you. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Madam President. I appreciate that. And joined by several people from my team, who I mentioned earlier, and we're also joined by our Deputy Chancellor Quintana, who probably has to change her name on her computer. Also, it's showing up as Chancellor David C. Banks, which means that you're going to have to answer all the questions when they ask them. All right. Instead of the one that I was going to send your way. No, I think we have a vision, and the vision is about bright starts and bold futures. It's about making sure that we build a solid literacy foundation for all of our kids so that they can take advantage of great career opportunities for themselves at the other end of the spectrum. And in between is a reimagined school experience for kids where they're not locked into just going to school to take a test, but rather getting a very relevant, culturally relevant educational experience that has impact and means something in their lives. So that's what I'm committed to. I'm excited about it. But I will tell you, I've been in position of chancellor now for 5 months. The number one thing that I've been doing that I did not anticipate spending so much of my time on before I got it. Before I got it, I knew certain things that I was absolutely going to have to do, and I was more than prepared. And I'm prepared for this, but I did not realize how diverse and intense the parent groups are. I'm telling you, I've been from the PEP to the CEC to the SLTs to the DS. I mean, there's a lot of parent organizations, and everybody has wanted to talk to me, and I certainly understand that. But I've also heard that people feel like there's no parent involvement. And I've said, my God, there's like 100 parent organizations, but everybody says there's no parent involvement. And I think what I've come to understand about what that means is it's not the number of organizations that you have, It's, do people feel like they're being heard? Do people feel like they're being respected? Do people feel like they have a real seat at the table? And I think that is what the angst that I have seen, that I've heard, that I have felt from parents. But I think I've also felt parents being very hopeful. Hopeful about me as the chancellor, hopeful about the team that we have put together, hopeful about the work and the vision that we are moving on. So I feel really good about where we are at this moment in time. We're just scratching the surface, a lot of work to do, but I think that parents feel like in this chancellor, they have somebody who is listening, and they do. When we announced that we were going to expand gifted and talented programs, that wasn't, every parent didn't want that, but a lot of them did. And so we listened, we heard, we responded. You never have everybody who is in full support. I mean, that's a utopian world. So I don't even aim for that. I aim to try to do the best job that I can. And my door has been open and has remained open. We've been as collaborative as we can possibly be. We continue to do that. When the mayor and I announced that we're going to be doing, and our deputy chancellor, dyslexia screenings for all of our kids going forward. You know, that was in response to lots of parents that we heard from, even before we came into office. We had parents and parent advocates and organizations saying, we have to do something about reading. We have to do something about so many students who are suffering from dyslexia, who we just don't service them. And so we're making every attempt to begin a process of being open and communicative and doing the best that we can, right? Today we made a huge announcement about expanding on the Asian American Pacific Islander curriculum and being able to offer that up for parents and families. The students, you imagine the number of Asian and Pacific Islander students who are in our school system who never feel like they are heard or seen. They never see themselves in the curriculum. And we're responding to that. You know, we've even before we got here, the prior administration was really responsive to the LGBTQ plus community, making sure that they are reflected in the curriculum. We want to make sure that the Latinx community is reflected, you know, and many others. That this is an ongoing body of work that we have to be engaged in, and we're committed to excellence. We're committed to working as hard as we can to help make sure that all of the dreams that all of our babies have can come true, and they can only, for so many of them, it only come true if you have a very solid education, and we want to make sure that we're doing that. So another thing that is part of how we're going to get there is how we're engaging superintendents. So I don't know. I know that was a question that was probably going to be asked. So if you don't mind, I can just lean into it right now. But when I got here, I heard from principals. I went around the schools, and overwhelmingly what they would tell me was that the executive superintendents was a position that they did not find that had great value. It cost, we spent millions of dollars in support of it. And they didn't mean the individual people, because the individual people are all great people. It's the position itself and how it muted superintendents. So if you're a superintendent of your child's school district and questions come to you, a lot of questions you couldn't even answer because you had to then go to the person above you. And so I didn't think that level of that extra layer was necessary, and said, let's eliminate that layer. Let's push things closer to the schools. And that's why we decided to support the superintendents in a bigger way. So we gave the superintendents a bigger salary. We told them this is a bigger job than they had before. And the easiest thing in the world would have been for me to just select all the superintendents. Easiest thing would have been just to keep all the superintendents that we had. I could have just done that and just kept it moving. But I felt in the new administration, I didn't hire any of these superintendents. I wanted to start over with a fresh start and see those who would fit within the vision that we have and would be the best fit for their particular communities. But we also wanted to make sure that we engage the community. By law, by statutory law, in the C-37 process, when you're selecting superintendents, you have to engage the President's Council of the CEC. That we were going to do. But we opened it up to town hall meetings because other parents that I would talk to kept saying, we want to be part of the process as well. Why is it limited to the CEC and the President's Council? There are others who don't fit within any of that, and they wanted to be part of it. And so again, just in our attempt to try to listen and to be responsive, that's what we did. So we opened up, we created these town halls. Some of them have been a little messy, but that's just part of what it is. Some of them, they've worked extremely well, and people and parents feel like they're being heard and their voices, on the record. At the end of the day, I'm charged with making the ultimate selection of the superintendents, but I'm doing it in consultation with everybody. And so that's the process. So I say all of that just to say everything that I'm trying to do is meant to be with an ear toward our community, listening to our community, hearing what they have to say, and being respectful of that. That does not mean that everything that we do is going to have the full support of every parent. It will not. Every parent doesn't agree with each other. So right on its face. I've been in meetings with parents and one parent sitting right next to another parent, diametrically opposed. So, so if I make a decision and one parent says that's great, and the other parent says, you don't believe in parent engagement, right? It can't be parent engagement is defined at, whether or not you agree with me. It means, are you at least listening? And I am listening and doing the best that I can. So
thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you so much for that, Chancellor. So, and we will say, right, parents are not a monolith, and neither are the people at the DOE, because I assume on your team there are people who disagree with you as well.
That's right.
And yes, and democracy is messy, but I think the important thing is that we are all at the table and we can come to consensus and sometimes agree to disagree and sometimes root for the other person, right? Because
That's right.
So anyway, you and I, we can talk a whole day, but I want to pass it to my colleague, Jennifer Goddard, for the first question.
Good evening, everyone. Hi, Chancellor Banks. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you coming to listen, and hopefully, this is going to be a productive session, and I appreciate your vision for the future of education in New York City. You just touched on it a lot. We were specifically wondering if you could please expand on that, what specifically for students in underserved communities, historically underserved.
That's one of the first things that we've been addressing since we came in. First of all, a student voice is something that has to be lifted. And that is going to be a big part of what we do going forward. I came into this office in January, so it's the middle of the school year. So it's very hard to implement very significant changes in the middle of a year. So all that we've been doing has been trying to meet, engage, listen, hear what people are saying as we ready ourselves really for the beginning of for the summer and next year. We're excited about what's getting ready to happen this summer as well with our Summer Rising program, as well as our Summer Youth Employment programming. All of these are things that we're trying to be very responsive to the community. But being responsive is also to students themselves and hearing their voices and making sure that we're lifting that up. And that's going to be a big part of the work that is going to be part of our value system going forward. So even as I will hold these superintendents who are ultimately selected accountable, a big way in which they're going to be held accountable is how they engage young people, how they make sure that their voices are lifted up in our schools. One of the things I can say as an example, I want to see a student government, an elected student government in every school in New York City. I think when you recognize how many Americans don't engage in the political process, don't engage in the democratic process, they don't come out and vote, millions and millions and millions of people. There are more people that don't vote in New York City than do. And so our government is run by people who are elected by a smaller percentage of the people. But we lament the fact that that happens, but you can't just shout about it. You have to do something about it. And I think that happens because we are not properly developing our young people to take their rightful place in society. And you do that by how you build that muscle, K to 12. So when you talk about my vision, what I see for the system, that's a huge part of it. I want our kids to be civically engaged. In order to be civically engaged, you have to be doing things throughout your educational experience. That's part of what I say when I say reimagine the school experience. It's not just taking a civics class and reading a book. I want you to go to the town hall meeting that your local city council person is having. Why? First of all, I want you to understand what the city councilman does. How do they affect your life and your family? Decisions that they make, and how can you influence them? You need to know who your state senator is, your congressperson, your state assembly person, right? All of these things are really critically important to shape how our kids are fully engaged. And that includes all children, special education students, and everybody else needs to be valued at the same level and fully engaged in their own learning and their own future.
Thank you so much for that, Chancellor. Lourdes?
Once again, thank you, everyone, and thank you to the audience for joining us this evening. As violent crimes increase in New York City, and with guns being the number one threat to our children, what is the DOE doing to support schools and community safety? And how are you committing to supporting schools and communities' own initiatives?
So I've been going around to I visited over 50 schools already and been pushing. You know, the mayor and I made an announcement yesterday, a big press conference. We talked about all of these weapons that we're uncovering in our schools. And it's been so interesting to me. We have a lot of our students who are bringing weapons, but overwhelmingly, they're not bringing weapons to do harm to their classmates. They're bringing weapons because they feel unsafe to and from school. And so, you know, in that regard, having these meetings with the police commission and the police department, and we're trying to figure out like how to provide a safer passage before school and after school, you know, to our kids, so that they feel safe. And some of this, they have to be directed in certain ways when they go home, where they can't just do whatever you want to do, because it's unfortunately, because of the proliferation of the guns and the weapons that are on our streets, it's not safe right now. I think our school safety officers, I think our principals, our school administrators, our teachers have been doing a great job in keeping our kids safe in schools. But there are a number of things that we have to do. And so those are things that we're actually working on as we get ready to go into the next school year. I've had ideas posed to me around an advanced level of technology for scanners. No student likes to go through metal detectors. Heck, I don't like to go through a metal detector. I'm sure you don't either, you know. But we also want to make sure that they're safe. So we're working to try to work with these other companies to develop a level of technology where it's not so invasive. You don't feel like you got to put your arms out like you're a criminal. You can just walk in, but if anybody did have a weapon, it would be picked up, and then we could stop that particular person, right? So that's one. You know, we definitely need more school safety officers. And a lot of people that don't like school safety officers, they look at it as police in schools. I don't. I was a school safety officer myself at Clara Barton High School in Brooklyn. And in most schools, school safety officers are just as important. They're part of the family of the school. They're not like these hostile, you know, police coming in to, you know, throw kids up against the wall. That's not the way that it generally works. And where it does happen like that, we want to know, we want to deal with that, because that's not what it's supposed to be. It's the reason why they don't carry weapons or anything like that. They're there to help ensure a level of safety for everybody, the kids, for the teachers, and everybody else. And a lot of schools, we have a school with 3,000 kids, and they have like 2 school safety agents, and they have like, you know, 25 doors that can get you in and out of the building. It's not enough. So we need more, but we also need more counselors as well. So these decisions that have to get made around the budget are always tough. We're doing the best that we can.
Chancellor, if I may interject in that, are you, I guess, a proponent of encouraging school communities and the neighborhoods to collaborate with the schools to come up with solutions to, I guess, complement the solutions that the schools themselves have? Because I know in District 8, CEC 8 collaborated back then with the former superintendent, Dr. Tobiah, for a community approach to safety.
That's right. That's right.
And we worked with the de Blasio administration and the police commissioner, and we were having all these meetings. And then, as you well know, then changes happened and the pandemic happened. And we still think, at least in District 8, that this community approach is still viable.
You're absolutely right.
Would you be supporting something like that?
1,000%. I'm glad that you mentioned it. Sometimes I miss the most obvious. I've been meeting with probably 150 community groups, and I don't call them violence interrupters. These are just folks from the community who are ready to lean in. So what we've been doing is working to put dollars aside, because a lot of these folks have been doing work and have never gotten paid to do it, and we want to put real dollars in the mix for them. They should get paid for these services that they provide. We shouldn't expect them to all be volunteers. And so at the end of the day, that is going to be the central way. All these other pieces really work to help to support it. But helping our kids to be to make better choices is going to be really important. And not just our kids that are in our schools. We have a lot of our kids who become very disconnected from school and dropped out of school, and then still create a level of issue and challenge for everybody else. So we got to help all of them. And these community groups, you're going to hear about that probably within the next 2 weeks with a big announcement from the mayor and I. You'll see many of these groups. But it goes back again to why the selection of the superintendents is so important for me, because we're going to do all of this work through our superintendents. A lot of people come to me and they want to know, what do you think, Mr. Ben? What are you going to do? What are you going to what we need is we need the community to be a part of the solution. That is what my body of work has been. And if some people will raise some issues, I said, and you don't even know who I am. Now, I'm not just a product of these schools, but I've led in these schools as well. That's why we created the Eagle Academy. The Eagle Academy went from 1 school to 6 schools, 3,000 Black and brown boys. That's the work that I led. And I did that together with 100 Black men and many other organizations, fraternities, sororities, folks who got involved to help us to help our young men to understand all the brilliance that they are and everything that they could become. We've sent kids to colleges, universities across the country. We've sent kids right out into the workforce from all over. That's the work that I have. That has been my career work. So you're going to hear us. We're going to be partnering with groups like Brotherhood Sister Soul in Harlem and United Black Men of Queens and Chianusi Bakari out of Brooklyn. There's a ton of these groups. We've been meeting with them now for months, even before I came into office, and we've been getting them ready to lean in. And they are representatives from the community, but we're going to do that work through our superintendents. So that's what we're about to do.
Thank you so much, Chancellor. Amy, and we're going to try to speed through them because we know we only have you until 7 o'clock, and we actually want you all night, but it's not possible. Thank you, Amy.
Evening and welcome, Chancellor Banks and your team, as well as our audience. Thank you for being here. And yes, our questions are really important. So my name is Amy Tsai. I'm the Vice President for Special Education District 75 Policy. I'm also a CEC member, as you probably know.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to really touch on your latest announcements, as you had said earlier, which is the expansion of the G&T, Gifted and Talented program. Now, that's the program that we currently are, expanding and through the enrollment process, but there's other programs throughout the city. And one of the particular programs that is for special education students is our students with autism ASD. So that program is a NEST program, and there is an expansion for the NEST program. So we're asking, what will be the plans? And also our Bronx borough does not have enough NEST programs for their students. And what are your plans to do for expanding that program in the Bronx? So 2 questions. Thank you.
I appreciate it. And I'm going to give them both. There's a reason why I asked members of my team to come on, because I don't like to be the one doing all of the talking. So our Deputy Chancellor, Carolyn Quintana, she's the Deputy Chancellor for Teaching and Learning Experiences. I wanted to handle both of those questions. Carolyn?
Yep, not a problem. Can you hear me? Okay, great. And Amy and I know each other, so this is good to have a conversation on this platform. So I appreciate it. And what a wonderful question. I was actually a principal of a school that had a NEST program, and while I thought that my school was great before we brought in NEST, it transformed teaching, learning, the community, everything, because we really thought about what children need and how we really design a whole environment to meet the needs of all of our kids. We had everybody trained. It was beautiful. So wholeheartedly in support of expansion of programs like NEST. And we are hoping to expand that program in the fall. We're going to focus on neighborhoods with the highest needs who don't currently have access to the programs. We're also looking to expand a number of other programs. And I think that's really important to consider, that the announcement of one does not mean that we are not focusing on others. So I know that we announced G&T, and that's a very big deal. We also announced that we're opening, 2 dyslexia programs, and that we're going to begin doing some of that training. But we're also going to be focusing on building up an inquiry-based approach to teaching and learning across our schools. And we're also going to be building up, and I know that Kate is on the call here. It's Catherine, sorry, is on the call here as well, who can talk a little bit more about career pathways. But we're building up some career pathways work and thinking about CTE very differently, and thinking about work readiness, right? So there's a lot that's going on that may not be part of an announcement, but really important to consider that it doesn't mean that we're not expanding. Just this morning, I was asked about, for example, our SEED programs. And if you're not familiar with that, it's our sensory exploration programs that have been happening on Saturdays. Really, really fantastic programs for, again, some of our autistic students, and beautiful opportunity for kids to have time for sensory play and to have all kinds of service providers available in the same room with lots and lots of love and care. The parents who are there are incredibly happy, right? And so we want to expand that as well. So there are opportunities for expanding what works, which is one of the Chancellor's pillars. And we really want to make sure that we are listening to the community and that we're grounding our work in research. And so something like NEST is a perfect example of that. And so we absolutely want to be able to expand that. Kim Ramones is on too. So Kim, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, or if I've left something out, or you want to.
No, nothing to add to that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And Jennifer, we'll come back to you. And if you can find a way to combine D and E, and we'll skip F.
I guess it's my turn.
All right.
Okay, you want me to go?
Yeah, go ahead. Combine them. Okay.
So we talk a lot about, the current, are we combining D and F? I'm sorry.
D and E is skipping F because the Chancellor already answered F.
Wait, am I combining D and E, Farah?
Go ahead, Jennifer. Yes.
Okay. So, Chancellor Banks, pardon the interruption. So we have a question about the anticipated wave of COVID that the experts have been talking about a lot coming in the fall. Anticipating this and not wanting to repeat the December, January Omicron wave that we've had this year, and looking forward to the remote learning that you discussed earlier, having it specifically like an academy separate. We're wondering, how is this going to work? What plans are being put into place now so that we can get ahead of this? How will this remote learning work? Will students be able to enroll in that and go back into their other school? Like, can you please get a little more specific?
Yep. So again, I'm going to go two-parter with this with Chris Grohl. Chris, I'm going to want you to say a word, as well as Deputy Chancellor Quintana. Again, Chris, to speak to Chris was our kind of our COVID czar in many ways. A lot of people that worked on stuff, but he was one of the people central to it. So as we think about a possible next wave on this, we're trying to be very careful. Chris can speak to a little bit about where we are and our thinking and getting ready. But and the Deputy Chancellor Quintana can speak to you a little bit also about some of our readiness plans as relates to virtual learning.
Yes,
Chris?
And if I can add something to that, Chancellor. So that is for the remote option in the fall. Now, for the kids who will be in the building, how do you intend to mitigate the spread of the virus?
Yep. So why don't you start, Chris, and Carolyn can go as well.
Sure. Thank you, Chancellor, and Jennifer. Thank you for the question. So, we've learned a lot over the last 2 years, and part of our approach right now is in partnership with the Department of Mental Health and Hygiene, our new commissioner, Vasan, and more importantly, continuing to work closely on a daily basis with Test and Trace. So there's a few things that are currently in place, and there are things that we continue to monitor, and new things that we're putting in place as we kind of move forward, as we're in a surge and anticipate that potentially cases could increase. So a few things. As many of you know, we have moved towards handing out home tests to the tune of 3 million home tests a week. We've made home tests available to students. Initially, the home tests were only available to those that were symptomatic or were exposed in the classroom. Now what we're doing is we're handing out tests to be brought home, not only for the students, but also for the students' families. 4 tests per week are being handed out to students, as well as 2 tests per week for staff. And what we're finding is the home tests in combination with our daily screening tool, which prevents folks from coming into the building if they're sick, if they're unvaccinated, and more importantly, if they've been exposed within the last 10 days. That combination has really given us excellent data on a daily basis. We are also continuing to have our situation room in place. The situation room is across the street from Tweed in Lower Manhattan, and that is manned by DOE administrators, Department of Mental Health and Hygiene epidemiologists, and key staff members from health and hospitals that oversee test and trace. So on a daily basis, as these positive tests are called in, what we continue to work with the Department of Mental Health and Hygiene with, and this is fairly new, we're looking at the positivity rate within the community. So for instance, if you have, a certain number of students that tested positive, and that number is roughly, say, 7% of the staff and students in the building, yet the community number is at 4% in the community, then what we would do is an automatic assessment to see if the transmission is actually happening in school or if it's a community spread. So every day I get a list of those schools that have positivity rates that are close to or higher than the community rates, and then an assessment happens. And when we find out that we believe that potentially there's, a fairly decent number of folks in a certain classroom or within a certain floor in a building, we'll work closely with the principal and the superintendent around additional mitigation strategies. We'll send folks out to the building to ensure that ventilation is in place, encouraging masks, and more importantly, the daily cleaning and the protocols that we recommend. And the last piece that I want to touch on, in addition to the home tests, we are one of the only places in the country that continue to do surveillance testing on a daily basis. So 20% of our students and 10% of our staff receive PCR testing on a daily basis, bi-weekly throughout the school system. So those numbers help us because they're a predictor. And we continue to work closely with DOHMH around the numbers that they're seeing. Many of the data are broken down not only by school building, but also within zip code. So that's a pretty good predictor of what's happening currently, and more importantly, with the 7-day average, what we've seen over the last week. And it's also a predictor of what could potentially be on the horizon. It's been a difficult time, as you know. We are trying at the same time to listen to parents and ensure that prom and graduation and end of the year events are able to be attended by everybody. At the same time, we want to also be cautious and careful that while attending those events and while releasing some restrictions to ensure that certain students and family members could be at these events, we want to also make sure that folks are safe. So it's that constant communication on a daily basis. Our First Deputy Chancellor, Dan Weisberg, is on the phone with the mayoral task force, as well as folks from the State Department of Health and our local Department of Health. So on a daily basis, we are still meeting and planning and continue to look at the data. So that's basically the COVID approach. I'll hand it to Carolyn to talk a little bit about virtual school and remote options.
I'll be brief, and thank you, Chris. That was super informative. I feel like I just got a recap too, so thank you. So in terms of virtual school, we're actually opening 2 virtual school options, rather 2 virtual school programs next year. And those are both going to start with 9th grade, one with a heavy CTE and internship option, and the other one completely remote. In addition to that, we are training teachers to be able to offer digital options, and we'll be working with schools in terms of what would need to happen if we were to have some sort of another shutdown, or if a group of, if a school has to, a classroom rather has to close down or something like that. We hope not to have that happen. We have learned that having students in school is really what's best. It's also what's safest. But we want to make sure that, like the Chancellor said earlier, that we're offering opportunities for different folks to choose what fits them best, right? And so those virtual school options are for students who may need to work from home, whether it's for health reasons, for socio-emotional reasons, or whatever other, maybe they were more successful that way, right? And so we want to build those options out and working with partners to get that done. And at the same time, we'll be training teachers to make sure that they are better prepared and that they're really confident. I think the biggest thing is making sure teachers are confident and have tools ready in case that they need to go remote, but also just because it enhances the learning. We learned so much when we went remote. We want to make sure that we continue to use those tools to engage kids. They've gotten used to working on computers, and so how do we make that work to everyone's advantage?
And just a quick follow-up is that it starts with the 9th grade, but that's the scaffolding. It will eventually be rolled out, correct?
Yes, it'll eventually include middle school and keep building up to high school. We didn't want to start with elementary because elementary would require a parent at home, and so that's so much harder to guarantee. And so we're absolutely will build out, and it'll depend on the demand. Right now, we really don't know how many people will want that kind of school, right? And so we want to make sure that, if there's a great demand for it and we need more, then we'll absolutely more. Yes, absolutely. Parents should be able to choose and be supported if they want the remote option. So that's part of this, right? Is that we're going to offer, and again, there are some folks who are absolutely opposed to this. It's not for them. And for the folks who absolutely need it, it is.
Thank you so much. I appreciate hearing that from a DOE representative. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. So you can just keep going with the question G.
Okay. Pardon me. The process for revamping education so that there's more synergy within the city is something that's concerning to us, Chancellor Banks. How do you plan to tailor education to meet the needs of every child? So, you address issues around your career, for instance, career readiness, life readiness, so that education can better counteract the effects of poverty.
I'm a very big proponent that if we don't create these pathways for kids, we're just playing around on the margins with education. I want all of our children, as they go through our system, to see the light at the end of the tunnel, to see the power of possibility for themselves. It's for us, it's going to be the North Star. Why do we go to school in the first place? Kids need to be able to understand how to prepare themselves for their own futures in a real way, not in a rhetorical way, in a real way. And that's a big part of what we're trying to do. I'm gonna let Catherine speak to this because she's part of the team that's been helping to develop this. And also you're gonna see some great announcements coming up, things that we're really, really excited about as well. Catherine?
Thanks, Chancellor Banks, and thanks, Jennifer. We are really excited about that long-term North Star of long-term economic security that we're all aligned to. That is the reason that students are going to school, as you mentioned, and we are really focused on that, laser focused on that in the coming weeks. And for us, what that means is, Jennifer, as you mentioned, making sure that all of our students are graduating ready for college and career. We know all of our students are headed to careers in the long term, no matter what they choose to do right after after they graduate. So that's really what we're focused on. And we're going to do that in 3 ways, one of which is ensuring that students have a strong plan, so have the guidance counselors, the support that they need to make a plan for what they want to do. Secondly, ensuring they have real skills. So both career-connected skills, skills associated with what they might want to do afterwards, whether that's in healthcare, tech, or whatever their passion is. And then ultimately, ensuring that they have a head start so that they're getting the early college credit that they might need to be successful, or the technical skills that they might need. And as the Chancellor mentioned, in the state of the city, the mayor announced funding for this important work, $33 million for next year, and we're going to be launching in making some additional announcements in the coming weeks. Our team has been doing a ton to engage parents and cities and students and educators right across the city and get their input onto what matters to them, how to ignite students' passion and purpose for what they're doing in their schools through connecting it to their careers and what they might ultimately want to do. And so if there are parents on the line today who have more ideas about how we can do that and have input they want to give, we will be making some significant announcements in that space in the coming weeks, and would welcome the chance to hear your perspectives, your ideas. And to what's going on in the chat, I think we're thinking about what's going to prepare all students. We know that there's not that some students may want to go directly into careers, and they should be prepared to have the skills to get good, economically secure jobs in the long term, no matter what they choose to do after they graduate. So that's what we're going to be focused on, creating that long-term economic security for each of our students, aligned to their passion and purpose. And welcome any input y'all have on how to make that happen.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Lourdes, I'm sorry, you're next.
The next question is, how do you envision, Chancellor Banks, education in New York City as it relates to community, city building, nation building, and the desegregation of schools? And how do you keep politics out of education?
You never keep politics out of education. Let me just start with that. And I want to be clear about what I mean by that. There's probably nothing more political than education. There's nothing that gets people more fired up than what's going on with their kids in schools. The kinds of things that gets parents out and involved, that gets politicians active and engaged, is when they hear from their constituents, who are the parents of the children. People love nothing more than their children, right? And so schools are part of political processes. That just is. We don't get to make all the decisions that we want at the New York City DOE, because we are subject to the State Department of Education, which is subject to the Federal Department of Education. Mm-hmm. So we exist within a political framework. Now, that being said, it doesn't mean we should be talking about politics in our classes. We want to make sure that our kids are getting what they need fundamentally so that they are literate and that they can take their appropriate place in society, whether it's going to college, not going to college, going to the work world, whatever it is. We need to make sure that they have a very relevant educational experience. And I'm of the mindset that happens together with community. And every community is not the same. In New York City, you know, the amazing thing about being the chancellor is that I'm moving all over the city on a daily basis. That is beyond exhilarating. I have to tell you, you know why? Because the whole world lives here. Like every race and religion is represented right in New York City. You can't go to any place else in the world and see the entire world in one place. The Bengali community, the Chinese community, the Irish community, the German community, everybody's here. And it is for somebody like me, it is beyond exciting. The different cultures and community is what makes up the rich fabric that is New York City. So that being said, that's why it's hard to just say we're going to do this like for everybody. But from one community to the next, they're like, well, we need something else. We're not looking for that. We want this. And I have to be responsive in saying that we will create a good school experience for all kids together. And that means listening. And so I'm not coming to you to tell you I have it all figured out and this is going to be the David Banks way. No, it's not what this is supposed to be. That's why I said it's always funny to me. Everybody, I come to these forums, everybody asks me, what do I think? I'm like, well, what do you think? Right? Like, we have to do this together. And And every community has its own uniqueness. That's the beauty of it. And so we've got to figure out how to make sure we're doing all that we need to do for every community. And it's not easy. It's a huge body of work. But I think it starts with, do you listen? And I think that's something that I've heard over and over again, that people felt like nobody was listening. Right. You know, I'm watching here on the news as this is going on. Pix 11 covered our announcement today on the AAPI curriculum. And, you know, there's a parent on here, she's almost in tears saying, finally, somebody's hearing us. You put this curriculum in place. We've been asking for this for years. Why should I, as an Asian family and a student, never see myself in the curriculum? It's as though I'm invisible. And then that's why people turn around and that's what makes it easy to knock people in the head and push them on the train. When you see them as the other, or you have somebody who can put their knee on somebody's neck and choke them to death. But you don't see them the same way that you see yourself. And so many of us, we don't understand fundamentally who the people are that we ride the subways with every day, people you may either work with. We don't even know each other. That comes from the educational experience. We got to make sure that everybody's understanding the value that we all have, the contributions that everybody has made to the building of this country. And even if they didn't, that they ought to be respected as human beings. And we ought to love our neighbors, and we ought to understand and appreciate, not tolerate. I hear people talk about tolerance. I have no regard for tolerance. What is it? Who are we to say you tolerate somebody? You tolerate, you know, if you don't like eating broccoli, you may tolerate it because it's good for you. But human beings ought to be appreciated, and we ought to learn from each other. And that's how we grow. That's what a good education is supposed to be about. Because you can only do that if you get kids out of the four walls of their school. You got to expose them. They've got to get around the city. There's no better classroom in the world than New York City. And many of our kids never leave school. Those are the kinds of things that I'm going to be pushing. Get out of your building. Kids should go to museums and exhibits and just see. You can see the whole world, not just in your textbook, but you can see the whole world by just coming outside of your block. Far too many of our kids, they never leave like a 10-block radius of where they live. They go to elementary school, the middle school is 2 blocks away, the high school is 5 blocks away, and they spend their whole time like just there. And they never get exposed to the rest of the city. And in New York, if you get exposed to the rest of the city, you're getting exposed to the rest of the world. That's the uniqueness of New York. That's what we are going to be trying to lean in to help make it happen. And we're going to hold these superintendents that we select accountable for driving that, for them to understand. Every principal needs to understand your school does not exist in a silo. You are part of a community, and you should be connected to communities. And parents should feel that within their schools and within their districts. Instead of having a lineup to come and want to talk to the chancellor, you shouldn't even care about what the chancellor is talking about. If you're getting what you need in your district from your superintendent, like that's the vibrancy of what it should happen. If everybody has to come to see me, then I don't need to hire all these other people. I can just get rid of all of them and just everybody meet.
Thank you. Thank you, Chancellor. That was actually a very good answer, and I'm very impressed by it. And I'm going to use that appreciation bit as opposed to tolerance. Thank you for that. You opened my eyes on something.
Yes, broccoli. You tolerate broccoli.
Yes. But I'm going to pass this to Amy, and oh God, I hope you will give us like a few extra minutes. But Amy, go ahead quickly. So
only me 2, because I've got to pick some. I've got to go pick some myself.
2 minutes. You'll give us extra, but please, Amy, go.
You're gonna leave the child standing at the bus stop. The child,
no.
The children. The child is standing at the bus stop waiting. So you go ahead.
Go ahead, Amy.
Amy and I swap places, Paris. So and you talk about the amount of work that's going on right now, and that's the next question, which is about what is the DOE doing about training, not just retaining and training, but recruiting the staff that we need to make this happen. Right now, we have social emotional issues in schools, and for instance, my son's school only has one guidance counselor and a part-time social worker, and they can't address anything beyond IEPs. So I would like to know, what is the DOE doing to fix the holes that now exist because of the pandemic and beyond to address this great amount of work that we have to do?
Yeah. Quintana, Q.
All right. Jennifer, that's an important question that matters so much to us and a really big part of the work that we're doing. And there's not an easy answer to that one because it is one that will take time. But we're working, fortunately, really well with our labor partners, and we have been meeting with local colleges as well, because we need to recruit more people to begin with. And so part of that is, in what way can we expand our current networks? In what way can we assure people that if they come, they're going to be well supported? And so part of what my team is doing is making sure that we're establishing a really clear continuum of onboarding, development, continuous development opportunities for leadership, so that they can see that you're supported all along the way. And then a really big part of our work is making sure that when you get to a school, that is an inviting and supportive community as well, so that folks can thrive. So that's part of the piece, right? But then the other part is, who are the folks that we need? We know that we need, for example, I think you mentioned, right, the bilingual service providers. There's a shortage, right? And so we need to figure out, where can we find these folks? Are there opportunities to use, funds that we may have available right now to offer incentives for folks to get dual certifications and extensions and things like that? We've been meeting with the state to talk to them a little bit too, about some of those programs. So we're moving beyond just our usual network, to find the folks first. And then what I'm most excited about is our sort of future educator programs. And so we're going to build off of what we currently have and start to try to recruit more from local communities, so that we build up not only the students in our own schools, but actually exactly what Letitia just put in the comment. We would love for parents and members of the community who maybe are interested or always have been interested in being a paraprofessional and aid a teacher, to be able to go through some sort of programs to get those certifications and be teachers in their own communities. Exactly. We're working with the state for those kinds of pathways. So really, really excited about some of those things. The problem is that, we need all those folks yesterday. And some of this will take time, but we are absolutely looking into it. And every time I meet with folks that, feel like they're interested in school, I always say, you want to be a teacher? Want to be a teacher? So if I can encourage each of you to do the same thing, I bet we can find some folks.
Thank you so much for that. Oh my God, I can't read the screen, but Deputy Chancellor, I know you're Deputy Quintana. I know the name now. I'm sorry. So we'll get, hopefully Jennifer and Amy didn't swap again and I'm calling out the right name. But Amy, if you would take out the last question, and Chancellor Banks, if you could wrap up, because I know you have to go and we want to hear you. As you answer the last question, if you could also give your closing statement, and then I guess we'll have to release you, and this, you'll be dismissed, I guess. I don't know. Yes,
Sure.
Go ahead, Amy.
So how would you describe what you have, what can we expect your impact to be on a short term and long term? And has your experience so far caused you to rethink what you initially thought you could or even wanted to do? If so, and how? Interesting.
That's a great question. That's a great way to wrap up also. First of all, let me just say this. When I was asked to take this position, I had never had a desire to be the chancellor. Most principals who've worked in schools, who've been successful, done a good job, as I had over 11 years as a principal, and even when I was an assistant principal, teachers, parents would say to me, "You're gonna be the chancellor one day. You should be the chancellor one day." Well, that's not unique to me. Many principals have heard that from people in their own community. If you have a beloved principal and people just think you're great, they say, "You'd be a great chancellor." So that's not unique. I never had any particular desire to be the chancellor. And in fact, when Eric Adams, 2 years before he became mayor, he was starting to plan his race to be mayor. And he said, "If I ever get to be mayor, I want you to be my chancellor." And I said, "Absolutely not." I'll help you find a chancellor. I'd like to be able to have some access, but I don't have any desire to be the chancellor. A lot of people they will be, are you kidding me? That's the greatest. I'd love to be. Not me. I wasn't looking for the job at all. In fact, I'll tell you a little secret. The person that I wanted him initially to hire to be the chancellor was Misha Ross Porter. And for some of you may not know, Misha worked for me from the time she was about 20 years old. I hired her as a teacher, and she was my assistant principal. And so she worked for me for a number of years. She was like my little sister. But as we got closer, the mayor said, I really want you. And when it became clear to me that he really was locked in on me as chancellor, and I decided that I would do it, I spent time preparing for this role. And in preparing for it, I had time to meet people like Carolyn Quintana and Christina Melendez and Dan Weisberg and Desmond Blackburn and so many others who I had a chance to meet and connect with them and start to build a team. I spoke to many of the former chancellors. I spoke to almost every former deputy chancellor in the last 25 years, just saying to them, if I get to be the chancellor, what do I need to know? How can I be best prepared? And all of that has shaped how we have moved in. We started this work and started being prepared before we even came into office. We were already ready. I don't know that has ever happened before. Politically, you usually don't have enough time to do that. The chancellor is selected, has maybe 2 weeks before the school year, before they move in, and then have to spend the rest of the year trying to figure out who's going to be on their team and everything else. We came in with a full team. So I say all that to say this, Amy, that I love every part of this job. And I'm giving it everything that I have. And it's not overwhelming to me because I enjoy it. I've always enjoyed engaging with parents. I have parents who will come up and show out and act up and be crazy and all kind of stuff. Love it, because you know what? When I hear that, you know what I see. You know what I hear? I hear my Aunt Barbara. I see my cousin Nadine. Like I'm part of the community. I see parents just like I see the rest of my family, and I see all of the different personalities. I got all those personalities in my own family. So, like I said, parents can be loud. They can do all kind of stuff. I ain't scared. Not even a little bit. But what you should know is I'm also that cousin who believes very deeply in our community and our families and our people. And I just want to make sure I give it the best. I feel like God has blessed me in my life. I've raised 4 beautiful children. They're all grown. They all have jobs. I still like them. Who's more blessed than I am? And so now I have the rest of my time here to just try to give back and do the best that I can. And none of it is personal. Only thing that's personal to me is that I truly believe that we have a responsibility for every single child to be able to be all that they can be. And our job is to create a system that allows for that to happen. And so we're going to have some good days. We're going to have some days that are not as good, but I don't really have bad days. And we got to make sure we keep our kids safe. We have to give them all the opportunities to learn and to grow. And I got to deal with a lot of the politics that surround schools, whether they're going to give you mayoral control. How much are they going to give you? Parents want this. Parents want that. Teachers are asking for this. I got to do a union contract. All of that is the political side. But at the core of it is those little children that we saw today at Tweed who got up there and performed and spoke, and the beauty. God has made nothing more beautiful than a child and the innocence of a child. And that's why it breaks my heart. I can't even look at these images of what happened in Texas. It's just too heartbreaking, you know? And my job here is to make sure we're doing everything we can to keep our babies safe and just pray that we don't ever have anything bad happen like that, and that our children are on a path to success and to happiness. That's all I want. That's it. And that's what I'm trying to be very focused on. And so I thank you all for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. And I just wanted to say thank you for the announcement today for the AAPI community. We've been asking for this for a very long time, and we dealt with a really dramatic situation during COVID. We're still dealing with a lot of racism around New York City and this nation. And I just really appreciate that you're expanding the Mosaic curriculum for all the diverse communities and cultures around New York City, and that we really lead the urban city of New York City with the nation of culturally responsive education. So thank you so much, and I appreciate, and I just want to end with my little statement here, but appreciate you being in the space.
Thank you. I appreciate all of you as well.
Thank you so much. So I guess this means class has ended, and we will be dismissing everyone here, going on to your families. And thank you so much, all of you, for accommodating us, and Chancellor Banks for agreeing to this round table, and also just for being, I guess, affable enough to really, welcome parents in the discussion, because I had the opportunity to meet you personally, and I say to everyone, and this is not, brown nosing, but because I personally, I tell it like it is. When I don't like it, I don't like it. When I like it, I like it. And the one thing that I will say about you is that you seem very genuine in terms of your desire to truly interact with parents and communities. And for that, for creating that space, we say thank you, because although, yes, like you alluded to earlier, the town halls didn't go very well for every community, but I can tell you, even when we had our own issues with our own town hall, we deeply appreciated the opportunity to have a say in what's going on and to listen to the candidates, and feel like for the first time, we really have an opportunity to be heard. And more than you agreeing with us and us agreeing with you, the opportunity to be heard is tremendous. So thank you for this evening.
I appreciate it. Thank you for your leadership. And I want to thank everybody on my team for showing up tonight as well. Now, particularly those of you who are in Tweet, please go home. Good night, everybody.
Yes, class dismissed. Bye.
All right.
No homework tonight.
Good night, everybody.